Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a new look at the legendary Titanic. These fresh images exposing an altered landscape 2.5 miles underwater.
Thousands of items recovered from the Titanic, and every single one of them.
Over a century after the Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic, a cutting-edge underwater drone was deployed to explore regions of the wreck never before reached. As it descended into the darkness, its lights revealed eerie silence and untouched secrets long entombed. But what the drone eventually uncovered sent shockwaves through the scientific community and beyond. So, what has been hidden for over 100 years? And what conspiracies have flooded the internet? Let's unravel one of history's most enduring maritime mysteries with an underwater drone that was lowered to Titanic wreckage. What they see terrifies the world. A decaying giant beneath the waves. It began as just another expedition. A sleek, state-of-the-art underwater drone was lowered into the frigid blackness of the North Atlantic. Its mission was scientific, routine, cautious. It descended slowly, like a ghost slipping through the darkness to visit a graveyard frozen in time. The Titanic, a monument to human ambition, tragedy, and the unforgiving force of nature. But what the drone captured was anything but routine. Within hours, images from the drone's feed made their way to the surface. Soon after, to the world. Headlines screamed, "Terrifying Titanic discovery," while social media exploded in speculation. They wondered if they had uncovered the captain's final message, stumbled upon a hidden vault of lost artifacts, or discovered a clue that could potentially rewrite the entire narrative of the doomed voyage. But before we reveal the chilling discovery, let's journey back. Far below the surface of the North Atlantic, in a place so dark sunlight has never reached, lies the wreck of a ship that once symbolized human greatness. The RMS Titanic rests nearly 12,500 feet underwater, broken into two massive sections, surrounded by a vast debris field. Once the pride of the early 20th century, today she is little more than a skeleton of steel, her grandeur lost to rust, pressure, and time. Her once glittering chandeliers now lie shattered in silt. Her grand staircase collapsed into dust. Over the decades, the wreck has deteriorated at an alarming rate. The culprit are said to be tiny, iron-eating bacteria, Halomonas titanicae, that consume the ship's metal and leave behind reddish formations known as rusticles. These structures hang like coral, beautiful in a tragic way, signaling the ship's slow decay. It's estimated that within just a few decades, the Titanic may be entirely unrecognizable, vanishing into the ocean forever. Diving to the site isn't just dangerous, it's a technological and human challenge. The crushing pressure at that depth would implode a standard submarine like a tin can. Visibility can drop to near zero, and the wreck itself is unstable. Sections collapse without warning, triggered by even the smallest disturbance. For every diver or remotely operated vehicle that descends to the Titanic's grave, there is a calculated risk that something might go wrong. But in 2025, despite those dangers, a new mission dared to go deeper and discovered something the world wasn't ready for. Led by an international team of oceanographers, historians, and engineers, the recent Titanic Exploration Initiative aimed to complete a full 3D map of the wreck using innovative technology. The centerpiece of the mission was a next-generation underwater drone named Nereus X. Unlike previous ROVs, Nereus X was powered by AI-driven navigation, capable of adapting to unpredictable terrain in real time. Equipped with Ultra HD cameras, LiDAR scanning, and sonar mapping tools, it could create a detailed, photorealistic map of the wreckage while avoiding obstacles as delicately as a hummingbird in a forest. It was also built with a pressure-resistant titanium frame, allowing it to navigate tight, dangerous spaces that had never been explored before. The mission's primary goal was to access previously unreachable compartments, particularly the lower storage decks and officer quarters, sealed off by wreckage and too dangerous for human divers. As the drone slipped through the twisted corridors, it captured familiar scenes: torn linens, shattered porcelain, even a doll's head half buried in sediment. Then, something happened. The drone's sonar pinged off a wall that seemed unusually intact. It hovered closer. The lights cut through the murky gloom to reveal a sealed doorway, its brass handle still shining faintly. The drone's robotic arm gently pressed against it, and the door creaked open. Inside was a room untouched since 1912. The team monitoring the drone feed from the research vessel fell silent. Inside the sealed room, the silt was undisturbed. Time had stood still. In the center of the chamber, a human figure sat slumped in a chair, skeletal remains still clad in decaying fabric. But what froze the team wasn't just the position of the body. It was the object clutched tightly in the figure's bony hand. Some say it looked like a journal. Others insist it was a metallic case or lockbox. A few noted what looked eerily like a gold pocket watch that's still ticking. An impossibility at such depths after such time. Whatever it was, it had been sealed away from oxygen, pressure, and time, and had preserved something impossible. In the Titanic's wreckage, other various personal items, structural components, and decorative elements have also been recovered, providing insights into the ship's history and the lives of its passengers. These include things like jewelry, coins, letters, and even entire rooms, offering a glimpse into the ship's opulent past. Letters, like the last one written on board by Esther Hart and her daughter Eva, provide personal stories. Other personal items include jewelry, clothing, and shoes. Chandeliers from the first-class smoking room, fine china, and even a statue of Diana have been found. A handbag made from alligator skin, tiny vials of perfume. A digital scan of the Titanic, using over 700,000 images, reveals new details about the ship's final hours. And the world began to ask, what did they see? And what really happened on that fateful night? Let's delve into the answers that lie in the ship's long, haunted history. A history we're about to uncover. The night of disaster. The night was deceptively calm. The sea, a glassy mirror under a moonless sky. There was no wind, no crashing waves, only silence. A silence so eerie that even seasoned sailors remarked it felt unnatural. And somewhere in that silence, death waited. Earlier that day, the RMS Titanic had received at least 6 iceberg warnings from nearby ships. Marconi wireless messages buzzed through the ship's communication room, noting a dangerous ice field just ahead. But the ship pressed forward at nearly full speed of over 22 knots. Why slow down, some wondered. After all, this was the unsinkable Titanic, the pride of the White Star Line, the largest, most luxurious ship ever built. Captain Edward Smith, a seasoned mariner nearing retirement, made a fateful series of choices. He left orders to maintain course. Some reports suggest he wanted to arrive in New York ahead of schedule, a symbolic crowning of his career. As night fell, the temperature dropped. The ship's lookouts, perched in the crow's nest without binoculars, which had been accidentally left behind in Southampton, strained their eyes in the dark. Icebergs were harder to spot on still waters, no waves to break against their bases, no moon to light their looming forms. At 11:40 p.m., it happened. A dark shape appeared dead ahead. A massive iceberg, nearly 100 feet tall and 400 feet long. "Iceberg, right ahead!" The cry echoed down from the crow's nest. The bridge acted swiftly. Orders were shouted, the ship swerved, the engines reversed. But the Titanic was a behemoth, and behemoths don't turn quickly. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side, tearing open 6 compartments. Titanic was mortally wounded. She would be gone in less than 3 hours. At first, she urged the crew to return to the wreck site to search for more survivors, though her pleas were denied out of fear that the lifeboat would be swamped. Later, she raised money for destitute survivors and fiercely defended the poor. J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of the White Star Line, the company that built Titanic, was a more controversial figure. Ismay boarded a lifeboat and survived, but many accused him of cowardice, claiming he should have gone down with the ship. He maintained that no women or children were left near his boat when he boarded, but the press vilified him, dubbing him the coward of the Titanic. Harold Bride, the junior wireless operator, worked alongside Jack Phillips to send the first SOS distress call in maritime history. After Phillips perished, Bride managed to survive by clinging to an overturned collapsible lifeboat. Frostbitten and exhausted, he still helped Carpathia's crew decode messages upon rescue. His courage kept the world informed and ultimately brought salvation. Each survivor carried more than their belongings. They carried memories etched in ice and steel. Surviving the Titanic wasn't just about courage, it was about where you were, who you were, and how fast you moved. Passengers closest to the top decks, primarily first class, had the quickest access to lifeboats. Their cabins were near the promenade, and they were notified earlier. Many were ushered to safety, while third-class passengers, largely immigrants, were trapped behind locked gates, struggling to navigate a ship they barely understood. Of the children aboard, a large percentage survived, especially those in first and second class. Entire families in third class, however, were lost. The tragedy played out along lines of class and chaos. Some people survived by sheer instinct. A few clung to debris, including door panels and collapsible rafts. Those who managed to stay out of the water had a fighting chance. But for those submerged in the unforgiving -2°C water, survival time was less than 15 minutes. Wearing a life jacket helped, but only if you didn't succumb to the cold. Several people were pulled onto overturned boats, like Collapsible B, where they lay drenched and freezing, hoping for daylight. There were tales of husbands placing wives on lifeboats and stepping back into the night, of crewmen helping children aboard only to vanish into the dark, of musicians who played until the very end to keep spirits calm. Titanic didn't just separate steel from sea, it separated the fortunate from the forgotten. The survivors were a living thread to a story the world would never forget. And as they disembarked the Carpathia days later into the blinding lights of New York and the flashing of cameras, they carried with them something more than survival. They carried the final moments of the Titanic and the responsibility to remember what the sea tried to silence. But the sea, as we are learning even now, never forgets. With the once mighty Titanic now quickly vanishing into distant memory, leaving nothing but debris behind, many have wondered, how was the Titanic built? What's the engineering behind a marvel of its time? Let's delve into that. An engineering marvel of her time. In the early 20th century, the world was racing toward modernity. Nations flexed industrial muscle, cities clawed upward toward the clouds, and the oceans, once the domain of clippers and steamers, were now battlegrounds for luxury and speed. In this era of ambition, one vision stood out: to build the largest, most magnificent ship the world had ever seen. Construction began in 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland, a place that soon resembled more cathedral than dock. The Titanic wasn't built. She was forged, inch by inch, plate by riveted plate. Over 15,000 men labored for over 2 years, pouring their sweat and skill into every beam and bulkhead. Some would never leave the shipyard alive, as injuries and accidents claimed lives even before she touched water. Titanic was one of 3 Olympic-class liners commissioned by the White Star Line to dominate the transatlantic passenger trade. Her sisters were the Olympic and the Britannic, but Titanic was always meant to be the crown jewel. At nearly 883 feet long, over 92 feet wide, and weighing over 46,000 tons, she was a floating palace of almost impossible scale. And she wasn't just big, she was beautiful. Titanic's design combined power with extravagance. Her double-bottomed hull was a feat of engineering, meant to absorb collisions and protect the ship's structural integrity. Along her length, she was divided into 16 watertight compartments, controlled by electronically activated doors. Theoretically, she could stay afloat even if 4 compartments flooded, a standard that exceeded maritime requirements of the time. But Titanic wasn't just about surviving the sea, she was about ruling it in style. Inside, the ship rivaled the world's grandest hotels. First-class passengers could dine in opulent salons, recline in Parisian-style cafes, or unwind in Turkish baths and squash courts. The centerpiece was the grand staircase, adorned with wrought iron, oak paneling, and a massive glass dome. A place where the elite descended as if entering a royal palace. Every detail was curated for luxury, from the fine china to the electric elevators. There was even a newspaper printed daily aboard the ship. Titanic was a marvel not only of engineering, but of imagination. A symbol of what humanity could build when it dared to dream big enough. And yet, it was this dream that gave birth to a fatal myth. In speeches, brochures, and conversations, Titanic was hailed as unsinkable. The phrase danced across headlines and drew passengers from around the world. It was a claim rooted in confidence, yes, but also in arrogance. This unsinkable label wasn't entirely an invention of the media. Titanic's builders and owners never officially called her that, but in an interview with the Shipbuilder magazine, she was described as practically unsinkable. That qualifier soon vanished in public conversation. Hubris filled the void, but beneath the grandeur and steel lay grim truths. A lot of important things were missing. Safety drills? Cancelled for the sake of comfort. Even the watertight compartments, once touted as foolproof, weren't sealed at the top. Water could spill over them like dominoes. So, when the iceberg struck, the myth shattered with the hull. The Titanic sank, not just as a ship, but as a symbol. The pride of a century drowned in the very ocean it was built to conquer. But even now, as we dive deeper into the secrets she left behind, one thing is clear. The Titanic was a testament to humanity's ambition. Something that still leaves people in awe even in this era. Titanic still amazes everyone. More than a century after it slipped beneath the icy Atlantic, the Titanic continues to haunt our collective imagination. It wasn't just the scale of the disaster that stunned the world, it was the astonishing facts surrounding it. Details that still echo with disbelief today. When the Titanic departed from Southampton on April 10, 1912, she carried more than 2,200 souls, passengers and crew alike. Of those, more than half would not live to see another sunrise. The numbers alone are staggering, placing the tragedy among the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in recorded history. Yet what makes these figures even more tragic is the knowledge that so much of the loss could have been prevented. The ship was equipped with just 20 lifeboats, enough for barely half the people aboard. This wasn't due to cost-cutting or oversight, but to outdated maritime regulations and a misplaced confidence in the ship's invincibility. Had those lifeboats been used to full capacity, hundreds more might have been saved. Technology, however, played a rare role as a savior that night. The Marconi wireless telegraph system, cutting edge at the time, allowed Titanic's wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, to send frantic distress calls into the night. Even as water surged into their cabin, they continued transmitting, their efforts ultimately reaching the RMS Carpathia. That ship would race through treacherous, ice-laden waters to rescue the survivors. Without that technology and the operators' unwavering resolve, the death toll would have been even higher. The Titanic's grandeur extended far beyond its decks and cabins. Adjusted for today's economy, the cost of building the ship exceeds $200 million, a staggering sum that mirrored the ambition behind her creation. Yet the ship wasn't just a marvel of engineering and luxury. It was a microcosm of Edwardian life. On board were 3 tons of mail bound for North America, tended by 5 postal clerks, all of whom perished at their posts. 12 dogs, pampered by their wealthy owners, also made the voyage. Only 3, small enough to be hidden, survived. One particularly haunting detail lies rusting in the deep. A brand-new Renault automobile, sealed in the cargo hold, now entombed in silence and silt. Each of these fragments, numbers, lives, artifacts, adds another thread to the Titanic's enduring tapestry. And though the ship has long since disappeared beneath the waves, her story refuses to be buried. Conspiracy theories. The sinking of the Titanic was one of the most well-documented disasters of the 20th century. Yet, despite the evidence, clear timeline, and hundreds of survivor testimonies, mystery still clings to the ship, like the rust that now devours its hull. Over the decades, the tragedy has become fertile ground for conspiracy theories. Stories whispered in drawing rooms and typed feverishly into online forums. Some are based on coincidences that seem too perfect. Others venture into the downright bizarre. All of them reflect a human urge to make sense of the senseless. One of the most persistent and provocative theories is the so-called Olympic switch. According to this claim, the ship that sank in the Atlantic wasn't the Titanic at all. It was her nearly identical sister ship, the RMS Olympic. The theory suggests that the Olympic, which had been damaged in a collision with a Royal Navy warship during a previous voyage, was secretly swapped with the brand-new Titanic in an elaborate insurance fraud scheme by the White Star Line. The plan, as the theory goes, was to deliberately sink the Olympic, collect the insurance money, and write the entire disaster off as an unfortunate accident. Proponents point to discrepancies in the ship's porthole configurations and changes in the nameplates. Critics, however, counter that the ships were far from identical in detail, and such a swap would have been impossible to hide from the thousands of workers involved. Then there's the eerie tale of the Curse of the Mummy. Legend holds that among the Titanic's cargo was a cursed Egyptian artifact, a mummy known as the Unlucky Mummy, rumored to bring death and misfortune to all who crossed its path. Supposedly hidden in the cargo hold under a pseudonym, the mummy was said to have caused strange happenings even before the voyage began. Crew members complaining of ominous feelings, unusual mechanical issues, and whispers of doom among the staff. Of course, no manifest has ever confirmed the mummy's presence, but the tale endures, resurrected every time a documentary needs a touch of supernatural drama. Perhaps the most chilling of all is the Illuminati theory. This conspiracy suggests that the Titanic's sinking wasn't an accident at all, but a carefully orchestrated plot to eliminate powerful men who opposed the creation of the United States Federal Reserve. On board were several wealthy industrialists, including Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and John Jacob Astor, all outspoken opponents of central banking. The theory notes that J.P. Morgan, the financial titan who funded the ship and had a suite reserved on the voyage, canceled his trip at the last minute. To conspiracy theorists, that's no coincidence. It's a smoking gun. They argue that the Titanic was a floating trap, and its fate sealed not by ice, but by design. And yet, as compelling or cinematic as these stories are, they crumble under scrutiny. Historians and maritime experts have thoroughly debunked each of these theories. No records support the Olympic switch. There was no mummy listed in the cargo, and the Illuminati theory collapses under the weight of historical context and coincidence. The truth, as painful as it is, seems to be far more ordinary: human error, overconfidence, and bad luck. Titanic's legacy and cultural impact. More than a century after her tragic descent into the Atlantic, the Titanic's legacy refuses to sink. Though she rests silently beneath 2 miles of ocean, her story echoes in museums, films, books, and the hearts of millions. The Titanic was more than a ship. It was a symbol of ambition, tragedy, and the fragile nature of human progress. Today, that legacy lives on in solemn memorials and stunning exhibitions. One of the most iconic tributes is Titanic Belfast, a striking museum built on the very shipyard where the Titanic was born. Its angular steel design evokes the ship's hull, and inside, visitors walk through interactive galleries that reconstruct every phase of the ship's short life, from its industrial beginnings to its final, fateful night. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, rows of white headstones mark the graves of Titanic victims recovered from the sea. Simple, heartbreaking reminders of lives lost. Around the world, thousands of artifacts, china plates, boots, personal letters that have been retrieved from the wreck have been displayed in traveling exhibitions, bringing tangible fragments of the past to the present. But Titanic's story didn't stay confined to history books or display cases. In 1997, James Cameron's Titanic film breathed new life into the narrative. With sweeping visuals and an emotional love story set against the backdrop of the disaster, the film captivated audiences worldwide and became one of the highest-grossing films of all time. It wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural moment that sparked renewed global fascination with the ship. Since then, countless documentaries, novels, and dramatizations have continued to explore the Titanic from every angle: engineering failure, class struggle, romantic tragedy, and ghost story. The Titanic has become more than a historical event. It's a metaphor, a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and blind faith in technology. It reminds us that even the most advanced creations are vulnerable, especially when human arrogance steers the helm. The Titanic's sinking also changed the world in very practical ways. In the aftermath, international maritime safety laws were rewritten. The Safety of Life at Sea Treaty mandated lifeboat requirements, emergency drills, and 24-hour radio communications. Technologies like sonar and modern radar would eventually prevent similar disasters. In death, the Titanic became what it never achieved in life: eternal. A monument to those lost, a lesson in humility, and a story the world will never stop telling. The recent discovery has triggered a wave of debate across the globe. Should the room be disturbed? Should the remains, the letter, and the artifact be retrieved or left undisturbed as part of a watery tomb? Scientists are torn. On one hand, the contents could yield historical insights never before imagined. The letter could rewrite parts of the Titanic's story. The artifact, if it proves to be something truly anomalous, might reshape our understanding of what was really on board that fateful voyage. But others argue passionately against intervention. The figure in the chamber isn't just a remnant of history. It's a person, frozen in their final moments. To remove the remains would be to desecrate a grave. Many in the public are outraged at even the suggestion. For them, the chamber is sacred, a time capsule of tragedy and human vulnerability that should remain untouched. The new footage has reignited global fascination with the Titanic, sparking a surge in documentaries and museum exhibitions. However, beneath the sensational headlines lies a pressing ethical concern. In our quest to uncover the past, how much of it are we willing to disturb? Perhaps the Titanic, a grave to over 1,500 people, should remain undisturbed. Its secrets buried with the human stories of hubris and tragedy that surround it. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.